talk about the new book that he just published. Here he is. Jim?
Hello. Jim Fleming, a small press publisher from Brooklyn, Autonomedia, which has been around for over 40 years, and we've published nearly 700 books in radical politics and culture. This morning, we are going to make a presentation about,
you can go by your computer.
About a new book called Cities for a Single Planet. I should mute myself. Where do I mute? Okay. Sorry about the feedback. This is a book by a group called Neustadt Schweiz in Switzerland, but mainly in Zurich. We're joined this morning by Panos and I think Michael, two of the contributors. There's Panos and Michael, I think, is here. There he is. Yeah. They, along with the primary author, Hans Widmer, and a fourth contributor named Dorothy Spuhler, are the contributors to this volume, Cities for a Single Planet, a model for the ecological transformation of the Earth. This is the fourth volume that I've done with a longtime friend, Hans Widmer, who can't join us this morning because he's traveling. The first book I did with him was called Bolo Bolo, which was quite successful. This is the 30th anniversary edition, and I would soon publish a 40th anniversary edition. It's been reprinted a number of times and is sold in the tens of thousands. Bolo Bolo was a kind of utopian world system, primary elements of which are reflected in Cities for a Single Planet. That was followed by another volume by Hans under the pseudonym PM, Akiba, a Gnostic novel, and another volume called The Power of Neighborhoods and the Common, like our neighborhood and the commons. Here again is the book that we're focused on for today. It's just is newly arrived from the printer. Though he can't be here, Hans has sent a text that I will read to introduce this, and then I'll turn it over to Panos and Michael. This is a relatively short text, and I would prefer to read it from my screen, so I'm going to try to switch to do that. It's called City is a War Cry. To use the term city has become an almost anachronistic exercise because the structure that was defined originally by strict territorial limits, walls, gates, etc., has been delocalized, deterritorialized, and asocialized, particularly by general auto-mobilization and the breakdown of infrastructural integration. Global or arrival cities are only cities in name, not self-governing communities of citizens mutually recognizing their equal rights. They are clouds of varying density caused by the emergent effects of global real estate and other market forces. Cities are capitalist machines. Traditional city life or urbanity merely survives as open-air museums, Venice or Disneyland as examples, or in the form of commercialized events. Citizens are mere shoppers hunting for cheap offers. Neighbors are a form of social nuisance. Retreating to anonymous private spaces seems paradise. Even green left governments do not help to rebuild interactive communities of empowered citizens, but aim only at providing housing for consumers, trying to create jobs by sustaining economic growth of anything, and to make sure that supermarket chain stores are not too far away. As this way of life wrecks our nerves and leads to spontaneous revolts, the respective structures are interspersed with some calming greenery and parks. The existing utopia still is a watered-down version of Ebenezer Howard's Garden City that was proposed as a cure to the dangerously proletarian inner cities. The current discourse on cities is dominated by concepts of optimal territorial layout, optimization of transport, and architectural forms. But if the term city is to become the synonym of an enjoyable, ecologically, economically, and psychosocially sustainable way of living on this planet, the core concepts must be self-sufficiency, food sovereignty, self-government, self-empowerment. Democracy is the basis of any form of sustainability. People who have no personal stake and power in the designing of their lives will automatically lose interest in ecology, justice, or participation. They will become mere objects of politically manipulated state regulations and thereby fall victims to authoritarian regimes of all kinds. The core of city is software, not hardware. The logic of smart regulation seems to correspond to the immensity of the problems. Big solutions for big problems must fail invariably, though, for seemingly big problems are in fact additions of myriads of small problems, actually how real people behave in their real small lives. And there are 8 billion of us. This is the reason why a planetary way of life must be organized on the basis of a layered system of socioeconomic, democratically manageable modules. The basic module anywhere on this planet must be an accessible form of household that provides sovereignty for food, shelter, and basic care. We, Neustadt Schweiz, have tried to define such a first global module, or GLOMO 1, based on research on ecological, economic, and social parameters. What we call GLOMO 1 should be the first welcoming structure for anybody joining the existing areas of higher density. In typical traditional arrival cities like New York, ethnic communities could fulfill this role of greeting, housing, informing, and urbanizing arriving compatriots from mainly rural regions. These structures have broken down or shown their political and cultural limitations by being exclusive, non-democratic, or even oppressive. What we need are open neighborhoods that can function according to the rules of real commons, cooperatives of around 500 members with clear institutional forms, territorial limits, and food sovereignty as the core of basic empowerment. These could be a universalizable model. GLOMO 2 and cities of a single planet enumerates 5 global GLOMO layers, from this small neighborhood to global in GLOMO 5. GLOMO 2, larger neighborhoods or even small towns of around 20,000 citizens, are the next logical functional space for all the public services needed for a civilized way of life in the 21st century. Municipal commons unite, support, and complement the basic sovereignty of the GLOMO 1 with schools, health centers, public meeting spaces, justice. Reclaiming direct municipal democracy also means reclaiming economic self-sufficiency, pushing out dysfunctional market forces, replacing them by communal, democratically managed enterprises is the precondition for a balanced, rational economy, ultimately worldwide. This layered system of commons, GLOMO 1 through 5, can be seen as a global proposal for a global movement. The more research we're able to put into it, the easier it will be to implement. Understood in this perspective, city is not a mere form of regulating housing, jobs, and shopping, but a war cry for a different global society. We can hear this war cry in the current worldwide revolutionary urban movements. City is not a nostalgic reference to better, orderly times, but actually a new project for all of us. It is underway, not yet here. So you can hear some echoes of Bolo Bolo in that, in this much more practical and realizable system. Many people who think about ecological change think that cities are somehow more of a problem than a solution. Back to the land often seems to suggest the surpassing of the city form, but not in this conception. So Michael and Panos are the two contributors to this volume who are present with us now. Panos is focused primarily on new media or IT functions in this system. And Michael's contribution is a lot about the communitarian dimensions and the sociality, I guess I could say. Panos, shall we start with you?
Yes. Can I share my screen? I have prepared some slides.
It's our phone.
Can I try?
Sorry, Panos, we didn't have your sound just yet.
Do you hear me?
Yes, now it's good.
I hear also myself. I'm uploading some slides just to show some images from Zurich. In Zurich, self-organization, it's a lot about organization. So this is why you heard all these layers of GLOMO 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know if you know that PM is the most common initials in the Swiss phone catalog. So this is how it comes, the PM, the nickname PM, and this is why I put my initial is PA, so it's close to PM. Unfortunately, Hans cannot be here. So you see my slides. So we are with Michael, authors of this book. Let me see if okay. I put here the last quote that I you hear me? I continue?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I have prepared to talk something like 10 minutes. I don't know if it's okay. You can tell me to stop. I just make a small overview of Neustadt Schweiz and a few words about my work on the internet, let's say, on the Bolo net. So Neustadt Schweiz is about a sustainable lifestyle that has 7 main ingredients. Bolos, in the initial sense of the term, small communities of around 500 people. In Switzerland, there are projects of this scale in the field of cooperative housing. So the difference from other cities is that all these models are different between them. So there is a lot of diversity, although there are cooperative systems. There is a democratically structured. There is a certain density, but with also common spaces, etc., tied to the regional land base, care work, and what it's called microcenter for common life and work. So Neustadt Schweiz, it means a new beginning, Switzerland. It has its source to the Bolo Bolo and the 80s movement, and later to the cooperative housing movement. And I think the most important is that there is in this movement that there is a positive agenda. Hans PM is always trying to make all these alternatives more appealing and not somehow looking like difficult to do. He calls a cooperative housing project a 4-star hotel. And the idea is always that we minimize private space like in hotels, but there are very generous and very interesting common spaces. And the organization of Neustadt Weiss tries to promote such ideas, invites special guests like Silvia Federici last year, creating workshops, trying to imagine new ways of common life, etc. And also producing books. Hans has not stopped at the Bolo Bolo. He has produced many versions of this that become more and more, let's say, accurate and scientific. He says that he stopped using words like commons because they are overloaded and he prefers to use numbers. So he makes some sort of very rigorous arguments of how much resources are available in a single planet and how much each of us, how much credit it has, and the things of organizational structures to make this possible. And yes, Jim already introduced the books that are published in English. The previous books are all in German. These books are in English, and this last book has been published also before in German and in French. This is the original depiction, representation of a bolo, a community, a neighborhood unit, or a Glomo 1 of 500 people around. Hans has been criticized a lot about this number, and he keeps repeating that it's not exactly 500 people, it's just to give a sense of scale. And since we met quite some years ago, I was the person to think of the digital dimension of the bolo, that in the 80s it was not so clear how it could be. So how the internet and can fit this concept of hierarchical communities when today the internet is something centralized at the global scale practically. So when all the world communicates through the internet, through the servers in California. So myself, my chapter is called The Terrestrial Internet. And the terrestrial comes from Bruno Latour, from his book Down to Earth. It's the idea of grounding the internet at the local scale. And before we met with Hans, I was very active on the idea of, I was calling it do-it-yourself networking or community networks, talking in different venues about alternatives to the centralized internet. And not only the centralized internet, but also choosing also the offline as an option, not to drag ourselves into the digital world and trying to find solution also there, but to create systems that offline life is always possible. This is very relevant now in Switzerland. We vote for the Swiss ID that threatens to make life without a smartphone almost impossible. And I was using at that term the term organic internet to make it a little bit more relatable to things that people know. And I was always comparing this industrial way of agriculture compared to the urban gardening, small scale. And these are some slides, I just to give you an idea of what is the narrative. And we have these huge servers and the data centers that, of course, then they are not relatable to the biological organic model, but this of the industrial large scale. And I was comparing Mark Zuckerberg with the CEO of Monsanto and playing with the idea of genetically modified organisms to say that Facebook is actually algorithmically modified data, and try to build on this analogy. And now these are some examples of the top-down Facebook approach. Here Mark talks with the Pope about connecting the whole world through airplanes that give internet from the skies. So it's like the God that connects everybody. And the big question is, can we have an organic internet actually, and how this could look? And at that time, it was very active, different forms of community networks and do-it-yourself networking activities that I was trying to organize. Some of them were trying to give internet access, and others were much more guerrilla networks that would try to connect people even without any internet access, just because there is not, or because it is censored or dangerous. In New York, it was the Red Hook Wi-Fi project. I don't know if it still exists in Brooklyn, and maybe you know the New York MESS community network. These are some images. I don't want to go to... I am still... It says that I'm not... No. Yes. So This is an example of New York. There is a very famous such network in Berlin. So people putting really antennas on the roof and try to create alternative infrastructures that are owned by local communities. In Catalonia, some of these networks now are declining. Wi-Fi net it has stopped. This is a network in mountainous Greece, in Sarantaporo, where at that time there was no connectivity. This was a squat network in Exarchia in Athens, where the refugees were having internet access from a network of neighbors that were sharing their connectivity. And on the other extreme, very small networks, guerrilla, a Raspberry Pi that you can put on a location and then people can connect and share information. This was from the Occupy times. Pirate box, very cool creative things, a tree that has a website and you can connect only when you are next to the tree. And this is an initiative that we did in Zurich, going to the airport with Greenpeace and hacking the Wi-Fi of the airport to ask people to fly less. And this is a nice analogy for me, the idea of the seed bombs and these small wireless networks that give an imagination of a different way to build the internet connectivity. And so it is possible. But the big answer is that we need a fertile ground to plant it. All these servers, all these machines that would replace the big servers of this big corporation need somewhere to be based. There are many interesting places that are already like-minded, that the cooperative housing. This is a cooperative housing in Zurich that looks a little bit like these images of Hans. And this is me in action to ask for a specific place to become some sort of a bolo. And this is a place in the center of Zurich, many workshops, complementary initiatives. And all this movement led to the founding of a very interesting place in the very center of Zurich. It's called L200. It's very neutral and a little obscure. The name comes of just the address, and everything is possible there. The motto is Was ist das in German, or what is this? And it's a very successful place, which had also integrated the idea of a wireless and local network. So a place that offers a digital layer on top of it for people that are inside there. We did many experiments with people passing from the street, with an Etherpad that they could type. All these don't work anymore. In Switzerland, some people don't know that Wi-Fi exists. They use always the 4G and the 5G. The Wi-Fi is almost not needed. This was another project. We had an interview with a server called Lennon, and it was in our basement, and we personified. We even changed the song, Imagine All the People, to say, imagine all the servers live for today, and there is no cloud, and things like that. So we worked a lot on this idea of building your own internet. And we collaborated with a group from Italy, hackers, the Circe group, that build a lot on the idea of conviviality. They have a very nice book on storytelling, Internet Mon Amour. So these were very inspiring, but somehow all this movement has not reached its potential. We don't have, it's not widespread. The 4G has given internet access to most places. The big companies have a big interest that everybody is connected, so to connect through their own servers and to be controlled by them. And I don't know if you know that the big news this period for these movements is the term digital sovereignty, that you can hear it in the European Parliament. Europe talks about digital sovereignty against the big US corporations. And this is a very interesting battle, and for the people to observe, like the European states trying to compete with the US companies for control over the citizens, but the citizens always being controlled by somebody. So, yes, this story is a little bit told in this chapter of the possibility to create alternative internet with this optimistic and romantic style of Hans, that we could have servers at every glomo hosting the services that correspond to this level. And yes, that's all from me.
Okay, thank you very much, Panos Antoniadis. I should simply say that Dorothy Spuhler's chapter in this book was about water as a resource. and the politics of water provision and maintenance. And now Michael Baumgartner, whose chapter is about communities and the social dimensions of the cities for a single planet. Michael?
Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not having a presentation, but I'm very glad, Panos, that you did it, and you actually provided a lovely bridge to when you said citizens being always controlled by somebody. I think that's a reality that most people are not aware of, or they think it has to be that way. And my contribution to Neustadt Schweiz, the reason why I joined was actually twofold. When I became a board member several years ago, it was because I was really intrigued by the concept of the GLOMOS, the 5 global modules, which basically provide an alternative to nation states. And as we all know, nation states are not natural, and they're not very old either. And they don't have to be. They are very powerful today, and today they struggle, though, because the world goes global. It's not the first time, but it's the first time in a dimension where it's hard for governments to control the citizens. So that really becomes almost a must for all political parties, right wing or left wing, or however you want to pigeonhole them. They all aim towards same directions, which is controlling the citizens. And what I'm interested in, and what my contribution was to the book, is about social structure. How do we govern if we don't just leave it to a few people? And basically, those who govern are still the same to the time back when nation states were first invented. It's always an elite, and it still is an elite. What I do is writing about the issues that could be different. And what always amazes me is when I do talk, and yesterday I had another small workshop again with members of different political parties, and it was actually quite interesting. It was conservative parties, but also members, one could say, or representatives from socialist or green parties. And I did a little exercise on democracy. And what is always intriguing to me is that everyone seems to think that we live in democracy or in a democracy. Now, let me tell you, and I'm sure many of you know this already anyway, is no one lives in a democracy, nowhere in the world. Even so, democracy has actually quite well been defined over 2,000 years ago. We haven't reached it yet. We're still being governed. And democracy is actually what it means when people govern. And it was fascinating. One of the critiques to democracy is usually the one, it's the dictatorship of the majority. That's a nonsense. Only someone who really doesn't know what 2,000 years ago has been defined as democracy can say this. Democracy is actually the basis of democracy, or what democracy must provide is equality, indifferent of gender or sexual orientation or color of the hair or whatever. Everyone who lives in a space has the same share and the same say. That's the basis of democracy. So that can't be the dictatorship of the majority, because you cannot inflict on someone else what you don't want for yourself. So it's quite fascinating. And when I then elaborate on what Aristotle, more than 2,000 years, said about democracy, when it's usually that I get attacked by my own fellows from the past, Green Party members or left-wing party members, because, as I said, they claim, it's the majority dictatorship. No, it is not. We have the problem that we now live in a system which is a republic system. All over the world, what's called democracy, these are republics. They're leftovers from the aristocracy governing. That's still the same principle. And what we end up with is elections, and then we end up with the governance of the majority. That's what we end up with in the current election-based system. Democracy doesn't include elections. It's one of the fascinating things about that we don't know about democracy. Aristotle made it very clear that elections are an aristocratic tool to stay in power. And I guess we all agree and see that this is precisely what happens still everywhere in the world. Never mind if you call them left or right, it's political parties that now are the elite that try to govern. Of course, you know, the financial ties and all of this, I don't want to go into that. But what I find fascinating about the concept of democracy, and that's why when I talk about organizing community at whatever stage, is that the goal of the aim of democracy actually is liberty. And that's quite fascinating. Most people don't know that. We in German, we only have one word for it, Freiheit. In English, you have two, liberty and freedom. Well, freedom is, we can only create freedom within ourselves. But what we can give as a community to everyone is liberty. And they're the same liberties that we all should have. And actually, these liberties should make freedom possible. Now, we're far from that. Even in... I have this strange sound. Can you still hear me? Good. Okay. Even in Switzerland, which I do when I talk in other places outside of Switzerland, I think we have probably the best political system today. But that's far from being democratic, because it is the dictatorship of the majority. And that's actually for people always a bit strange when they hear that not even Switzerland can really claim. We always say we're a direct democracy. Well, democracy doesn't need any labels going before it. It's either democratic or it isn't. You know, liberal democracy, what the United States claims to be, there's nothing liberal about that kind of democracy. It's not democracy. So what I do, and that's my contribution in the book, not what I just told you. I don't talk about what you can read in the book. That's a bit silly, you know, having this extra time. But what we end up with is that we realize when we talk about alternative to nation states, that which needs to be organized by all of us, for all of us, is actually just one part of living together. There are many elements where no one has a right to talk into someone else's decisions. We now have the problem in Switzerland. We voted a couple of years ago that if you do not want to donate your organs, you don't have to do anything. It's assumed that if you do not have a passport, an organ donor passport on you, which is a little card saying, you know, if I'm brain dead, which actually isn't dead, you can use my organs. Now, the government has twisted. We had a popular vote where the government put a lot of advertisement in it, telling people to say yes, that turning around the existing habit that now we have to have a passport, and we can actually only have that when we have a digital passport, which is another non-free reason to probably say yes for a lot of people to say yes to an electronic ID, that you actually have to say, I don't want my organs to be taken from me in the case of my brain death. So the government completely twisted something which is entirely individual. This is nothing for the government to organize. This is health and health related. It can't be that the government tells us what health is and how I have to define my own health and what I have to do in order to stay what I would call healthy. So we learn now that we have spheres where the government or the we actually doesn't have a say. But it's really just down to me. And that's what in democracy is called the freedom of the people, of the individual, that we have individual choices that are very individual and affect mainly us. And they have to be left to us to decide. We will never get well-educated. Well, education, I don't mean what we now get state fed as education. But, we don't, if we don't have a system where we learn to make mature decisions, then the system is not worth our support. Democracy aims for free individuals. So that is why I find it quite fascinating. I never thought that I have to defend or talk about democracy. I only learned that most people don't have an understanding, not a clue about what it means to be or what democracy really means. So this is my contribution these days to Neustadt Schweiz, that I find myself, even in Switzerland, telling people who are politically engaged and have been for many years and talk about democracy left and right, they talk about something else, but certainly not democracy. So that's my contribution for today. Maybe there's questions, I don't know. I can't hear you, Jim.
What do I do here? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we have about 6 or 7 minutes for some questions. I'll ask the first one. I hope you'll give me brief answers. You have collaborations with a number of other places, primarily, I think, in Europe. What corresponding efforts are you aware of for something like what you're doing in Neustadt Schweiz?
Panos, you want to go first?
I could say, I didn't say that I'm Greek. So this idea of cooperative housing in Greek sounds very exotic, actually. And we have tried recently to create what we call a knowledge exchange process. So there are some new initiatives that have learned from how it happens in Switzerland. The most difficult part to understand is that you can start it without having a house, for example. This organization acts now as an incubator, a type of Neustadt Schweiz for Greece. And there are slow steps. And yes, Switzerland, it has an advantage. How can I say? Some things of this sort happen easier in Switzerland than in other places. There is a culture of cooperatives, respecting the rules, financial instruments. So how to translate this in places that these are not in place? It's an open question, and we try.
Okay. Michael, you have something to add?
I probably could add to that in Switzerland, in Europe, the awareness of other solutions is growing. And that has simply to do with, we have quite a few nations, France and England, for example, where there are parts of cities that are abandoned. People still live there. That in the States as well. You have probably whole cities that are abandoned by now. So they have to reorganize. They can't just, people still live there, and they have to create life and living and make it possible. They actually do quite well. And what they do is, what they realize is that it needs alternatives. So we often get now contacted. We just this year recently had visitors from England, from a larger city in England, where there's a whole area that has basically been abandoned and that has been taken over by a cooperative. That's how they organize often. And they wanted to have some ideas from how do we socially structure, how do we govern, but also to very practical things, creating powers of the grid and money, alternative currencies. So we get now quite a few invitations from neighboring countries. This is why we also translated the books in different languages, where we actually are aware of that humans get together, reorganize, and want to go different ways. And what is quite fascinating is that our texts are by now on the English website. We might be able to share that with you. It's newalliance.com. I think it's .com, and New Alliances. And there, these concepts are now out in very different language. I think it's, Panos, correct me if I'm wrong, even a Chinese version by now. So it's out there, and people are doing it. That's the wonderful thing. So, we are contacted often with very particular questions. How do you manage this? Like the internet issue is one. And we sometimes just, are contacted for an input like we have now today, that they are different ways of not just living together, but governance, for example, and organizing, the access to technology.
Okay. Maybe we have time for one other question.
I have a question.
Yeah. Black.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, and who are you? Can't see you.
I'm Black from New York City Anarchist Book Fair. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Okay, look, I have two questions. One is about currency in this new society. I think any kind of currency creates class. It means one of the points I have been reflecting a lot is really the fucking elimination of money. I think while we have money, we have class. It means that's, from my perspective, is a thing I consider, and I have been thinking a lot about that. You understand? The second thing is how Swiss, because we love Swiss, we love the meeting that we have 2 times now. We love, everything we did here and there. The thing is how Swiss deal being imperialist and the relation between the anarchists in Switzerland with how they affect the destruction of the imperialism in the rest of the world. No, because Europe is like the privilege. No, I mean, I come from Brazil. It means, you know what I mean? It's like how the anarchists deal with the privilege in relation for the other countries. That is the colonial.
Well, what can I tell you? The first one wasn't really a question, was it? It was more of your opinion, and I think there is a valid point in that. Money provides more problems than solutions.
I want to hear your opinion, you know what I mean, about money, like that perspective.
Well, there's a lot to say about that, but money certainly provides, in the short time that we have, I would agree that it provides often more problems than solutions. And I think the underlying problem is the problem of exchange. I think we could do more often, learn to give freely rather than exchanging, whether the exchange goes through money or you give me this weather and I'm going to give you these pans in exchange. Learning to give, especially the things we don't need. And we live still in one of the richest, probably still by many standards, at least top of the list, richest countries. There's plenty that we can give. Look in my background, lots of books and things that I work with. Do I need them all? Time being, yes. When I don't, rather than selling them, giving them to someone who is interested. As for the anarchists in Switzerland,
create libraries.
Yes, exactly.
Libraries, or everybody have access to the books.
We now do that actually in our village. We have that. We have several places where you just give books and people can go and get, take one, put one in, whatever. The other, what you asked about anarchy in Switzerland, it's very established, in my opinion. And I just like to answer your question with sharing an experience that I had. When I was criticizing...
1 minute, my love, just 1 minute we have. 1 minute to finish.
Panos, do you want to say something? So I'm not...
No, I don't want to say anything. I just want to listen. 1 minute.
I just wanted to give a reference of the Pessoa book, The Anarchist Banker, and say that in Switzerland, they use this plenty of money at least to experiment with some alternatives, and they produce some good experiences and good case studies that people can get inspired. But of course, the privilege is here, and this cannot be, thrown away.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. It was amazing. You want to say something?
I'd just like to say thank you, Panos and Michael, for your appearance. And thanks to all of the organizers of the very successful 19th annual New York City Anarchist Book Fair, probably the best attended one ever. And
each year gets better.
A marvel.
Each year gets better.
Every year it's better. Yes. Thanks again. Okay.
Thank you, and have a wonderful remaining fair.
You too. Love from New York City. Love.
Bye. Thank you.
Look, we are here. Look,
Thank
we
you.
are here. Look, many people here. Look at this. You see? Many people say, hey, look this. You look this, everybody. People. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.